Hey guys, welcome to Finally Clicked, the podcast where we discuss business, leadership, and personal development. My name is Margaret Smith, and I'm the Director of Operations for Pickett Street Properties, a real estate team out of Bothell, Washington. And I'll be here every week with our owner and team leader, Jesse D. Moore. We'll be digging into concepts and ideas that have helped us both personally and professionally, and you'll also get a chance to hear from local and national experts that we know provide massive value to get to the point where it all finally clicks.
Welcome to Finally Clicked with Jesse Moore and Margaret Smith.
Welcome.
We're eager to start this episode. We're eager for you to listen. We're eager to speak into your eardrums. As Theo Vaughn would say, to pry open your ear holes.
Really? He says that?
He's a comedian, Theo Vaughn.
Oh my God, I love that. To pry open your ear holes.
He says things in such a unique way that you would never, think of it.
I love that.
Ear hole is actually probably too normalized. He'd probably say like a well, your ear well.
Your ear well.
Or like a sewer canal for your ear, an ear. No, I don't know. I can't even pretend to be Theo Vaughn.
Oh my God. I love that.
I love people with unique. I like people with unique voices. You know, a unique way of saying things, unique way of looking at the world. I swear to God, every time we start a podcast, the neighbor here starts yelling.
I know.
Did you tell them that to pipe it down? Can you text somebody?
They know that we're starting.
Can you text somebody?
Thankfully, we can't ever really hear
Andy,
them.
I'm talking to you. Okay, this is your responsibility to keep your people from roaring and yelling.
You know, I have to say, as I'm texting her, I started getting these emails with extra additional information about, what to do to help promote your podcast and stuff like that. And I'm happy to say that, some of the things you can do to help people connect, we're doing already, which is number one, bringing enthusiasm, which I feel like we're always excited.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I need to apologize to everybody.
That was not what I expected.
Because you're probably, I know we're having issues with sound, and so you probably have your sound jacked, and then I just yelled in your ear.
People do say that.
Okay, I'm aware. I apologize. I meant, whoa. I was trying to bring energy to the conversation.
That was good. Well, I don't think you need to try. I think we bring it.
We do it?
Yeah.
Well, I apologize.
And the other thing I noticed is there's a link on there that is specific to microphones for women. And so I've been thinking about getting the microphone because apparently this microphone might make my voice lower than it actually is.
Your voice is fine.
Okay.
I can imagine. That's a weird thing. If you that'd be a good comedic bit, right? Like an improvisational bit. Okay, microphones for women. Go. What do they look like? Go.
I want one of the microphones that comes on the mannequin and then it goes left ear, right ear, like they do for
true ASMR.
Yeah. I do kind of want to try that.
That would be called stereo versus mono.
I'm learning those terms as I edit and produce.
Today, we've been bringing a lot of interviews your way. We've been bringing a lot of random ASMR and whiskey episodes your way. Today, we wanted to discuss a book that has had a big impact on us. The first time we did this, we did the 4 Agreements, and it was a very early episode. Yeah. I think number 2. Maybe.
I think actually, right away.
And so we haven't done one since then. And so for this episode, we are going to be discussing The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. I want to explain the book and the title. Many people are familiar with The Art of War, which is a book by Sun Tzu, who's like a 13th century or 11th century Asian general. And this is not that book. He's doing a play on words, and it's called The War of Art. And the book he's a writer. Steven Pressfield is an author, a writer. He wrote The Legend of Bagger Vance, for those that might be familiar with the movie, starring, it's on the tip of my tongue. Matt Damon. Who calls Matt Damon? And some other books. And this book was recommended. I forget how. I'm trying to remember
where this came from.
Where it came from.
Somebody did recommend. Was it?
It was. it was recommended to me, and it's interesting to me because my father is an author. There's a few thousand books in my childhood home. Instead of insulation or tchotchkes, my parents have books. Behind every door, every bookcase, everything's been modified to also be a bookcase. Like an entertainment.
Oh, really?
Well, like the entertainment center is probably, it holds a TV and it holds probably 500 books.
Wow.
And so there's like books everywhere. And so I'm very familiar with, I'm an English lit major. I'm familiar with many authors.
I wish I could say that too.
I'm familiar with
at the same time.
many books on writing. Probably one of the most famous is by Stephen King, and I think it's called On Writing. So there's a lot of books that teach you how to write and how to write well and how to make yourself write. And it was interesting to me that this book was recommended to us because this book is about writing, although it so applies to entrepreneurs as well. And that's why we're going to be talking about it. So you may want to Google The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. Steven is Even. And I recommend everybody get a copy. I would get a few. That I've handed this. If we have a book that we like, I usually ask you to order a case of books.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a ready supply so that if anyone wants a book or we feel like we need impressed to give someone a book, that we have these readily available to hand out. And this is a book that I've probably passed out for free as much as any in the past year, probably even with the 4 agreements. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Margaret?
Well, as I was refamiliarizing myself with all the different things that I underlined when we read this, I think that we read this last year. The number one thing that spoke to me about this book with him is it was like a lovely feeling to read it. It's like that's my first thing that comes to, because of the way that he separates the chapters. They're really short, like 1 or 2 page little mini chapters with maybe a paragraph. And it's a concept on each page. And the way he writes is lovely. And it reminds me kind of poetry, which I think I really, and people know that I have a love of words. They're already teasing me about it after hearing things on the podcast. So even in the very beginning, in the foreword that's written by Robert McKee, Robert says, so although Steve and I may differ on the cause, we agree on the effect. When inspiration touches talent, she gives birth to truth and beauty. And when Steven Pressfield was writing The War of Art, she had her hands all over him.
I know, right?
I loved that line.
That's
and
how
I
you
underlined
make
it.
literature sound erotic.
It's so true.
And when Steven Pressfield was writing The War of Art, she had her hands all over him.
I love it.
Yeah, when inspiration touches talent, she gives birth to truth and beauty. I mean, right there, you have foreplay, sex, fertilization,
the whole circle,
delivery.
Everything.
I mean, those are powerful 2 sentences.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's. When you get into the book, I think it catches you by surprise.
Absolutely. I'd say right off the bat. I didn't expect to like it as much as I do.
Well, we're used to reading business books.
Yeah.
And here's my problem with business books. The problem with business books is that most concepts, if they're brilliant, they're simple. Mm-hmm. And if they're simple, it doesn't take 250 pages to explain it.
Correct, yeah.
Most business books should be about 50 pages.
I agree, totally.
And instead, they just I don't know what.
I think people they overcomplicate it because they want to appear smart and they want to make it difficult for people to understand sometimes.
I don't know. I don't think it's the author's fault. I think it's the publishers. I think
true.
How many people will buy a 50-page book? You know, it might not have enough meat in it.
True.
And so we like a book that has some heft to it. And so what happens though is, and you know what, I think a great example of this is Simon Sinek's book.
Yeah.
Like that's a simple principle that I think could be explained in 50 pages. Mm-hmm. So my point is that usually we get the simple strategy or the nugget or whatever it is, and then we just read 4 or 5 different iterations of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And
That's funny that you say that, because actually that's my number one complaint when I was in school in the social work area was that everything that was said in 50 pages could have been said in like 4 when you're reading articles that they give you.
Yeah.
And I hate that, because the simplicity is what's going to help you replicate and actually implement in your life. So I agree.
So what's interesting about this book is literally, I just opened it to page 7, and that chapter is called Resistance is Invisible.
Yeah.
And it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sentences long.
Yeah.
If I flip through here, I bet there's a couple chapters that are literally, here's one on page 16 that is 3 sentences, 4 sentences. Now there are chapters that are several pages long, but to kind of explain what this book is and what Steven Pressfield's trying to do, his goal is to write every day. And much of what this book is about what happens from the time he wakes up to the time he sits down to write, which is the war of art. That's the war. The war for him is getting up and then doing the hard thing.
Yep.
Getting up and being consistent and making yourself do everything that your mind, for whatever reason, has employed 800 different methods to keep you from doing something that you know is good and important, but maybe you don't have the desire to do it. And that is the war of art. So, and what he does then is, and this is applicable to entrepreneurs because we suffer from the same problem. What he does early on in this book is he names the enemy, and the enemy is called resistance. And resistance is anything that keeps you from doing what you know you should be doing. And the very first part of this, the book's broken up into 3 parts, and the very first part of the book is essentially naming and defining resistance and its many forms.
Yep.
So let me read a couple of examples. So resistance is internal. I highlighted, it is self-generated and self-perpetuated. Resistance is the enemy within. Resistance has no conscience. It will pledge anything to get a deal, then double-cross you as soon as your back is turned. If you take resistance at its word, you deserve everything you get. Resistance is always lying and always full of shit.
Gosh.
It understands nothing but power. It is an engine of destruction, programmed from the factory with one object only, to prevent us from doing our work. Rule of thumb: the more important a call or action is to our soul's evolution, the more resistance we will feel towards pursuing it.
Yeah.
So he does such a great job. And so what he literally does is he sits down and writes every day. Yeah. And the reason why these chapters might be short is that he may not write a lot every day, but he writes something. And I think we can see that idea executed in this very book, in the short formatting of the chapters, in the simplicity of the ideas that he's trying to elicit. Page 13, that is a 2-sentence chapter. And the headline is Resistance is Universal. And he says, we're wrong if we think we're the only ones struggling with resistance. Everyone who has a body experiences resistance. And he does say early on, I think it's in the preface, that who suffers from resistance? And he lists 11 different types of people. And so I just want to read 2 that I thought applied. Number 2, the launching of any entrepreneurial venture or enterprise for profit or otherwise. And then number 3, any diet or health regimen. So
yeah,
just out of the first, out of the gates,
identify.
He identifies artists, he identifies entrepreneurs, and he identifies anyone trying to get healthier. So I think with those 3, he hits all of us over the head.
Oh, completely. Yeah. Do you have one that you really connected with in the first chapter in the first book?
The first chapter is like I said, each chapter is like a page.
Yeah. So in the in the first book where he names.
Book one. Okay.
Yeah, because I have one that I think when we were reading this at the time, and I still feel some of this, the resistance recruits allies. So he says, when a writer begins to overcome her resistance, in other words, when she actually starts to write, she may find that those close to her begin acting strange. They may become moody or sullen. They may get sick. They may accuse the awakening writer of changing, of not being the person she was. They are trying to sabotage her. And the reason is that they are struggling consciously or unconsciously against their own resistance. The awakening writer's success becomes a reproach to them. So, as people, we talked about this at the retreat. A lot of this reminded me of Gary John Bishop, actually, and talking about, because he was like, hey, I don't love to write every single day. I'm not at my typewriter saying, oh my God, I love this so much. I love working and I love writing. But he does it anyways. And so, but talking about how people around you may not understand the changes you're making if you're working on personal development or achieving certain success in your professional life. And I know you've dealt with that. That was one that I really connected with.
So the book one is the first part of the book, and he says that it's resistance defining the enemy. So the first part of that book one is about really defining how resistance can show up. And so think of resistance as a shapeshifter that shows up everywhere.
Nice. Good metaphor.
I mean, literally, it's the monster under your bed when you wake up. It's the monster in the mirror when you go to brush your teeth. I mean, it's the thought in your head at any given time. It's procrastination. It's, he says even sex, he talks about how sex can play a role in resistance. Victimhood, self-medication, unhappiness. I'll share a few ideas. So one thing he said, I love this. Casting yourself as a victim is the antithesis of doing your work. Don't do it. If you're doing it, stop. I like it when people speak clearly to an idea, right? Rather than pandering to a victim and cajoling them to awareness, he just says,
just stop.
Hey, if you're casting yourself as a victim, that's the opposite of doing work.
Yeah, he really breaks it down.
And then when I first read this book, there's a chapter called Resistance and Fundamentalism that blew my mind.
That's the one I thought you were going to mention.
Well, and you know what? It hit me differently. I read it last night, and it just didn't hit me the same way. And I think it's because I've already accepted the idea, right? It's not a new idea now. And so there's certainly a lot in there for me to talk about. And so let's for a little bit.
I think that it's a great topic too for a lot of our listeners.
And I want people to understand me too. So I went to Montana State University mostly because of scholarships. Why did I go to that school specifically? It's because of scholarships. And it's not known as having a great English program or journalistic program. University of Montana is very well known for its journalism program. And something people may not know about me is I'm actually pretty lazy. And what I mean by that is I try to, there are certain talents and gifts that I have that come pretty easily to me, and I like to focus on those things rather than working extremely hard at something that I know nothing about. And so I decided to get an English major because English comes easy to me. And I knew I didn't want to teach, so I didn't get the teaching emphasis. I didn't want to be a journalist, so I didn't go to University of Montana. I literally just wanted to get my college degree to kind of check that box off the list. And that's essentially what I did. I knew I wouldn't probably use my degree in any practical way, but that it would help me if I wanted to become a lawyer or whatever professional endeavor I pursued. And the reason I'm explaining this is my final thesis, kind of the main idea that I had as I went through my undergrad was that artists struggle differently than everybody else. And what I meant by that is that I basically came to believe that how an artist is comprised, which is mostly emotion and nostalgia and tragedy and drama. Mm-hmm. Like that's in it. You can, if I say those words, you can think of people that
totally
embody that
completely.
Maybe myself.
Maybe.
And so I just thought if I had this idea that essentially if you were an artist, then you suffered uniquely. Because I suffered uniquely. And it's not that it's better than anyone else or anything else. It's just that because you were predisposed to kind of like sensitivity and observation, that it made us a little bit more emotional, more raw. And so I really developed this idea in my studies about the struggle of an artist. And there's many authors that have played with this concept. James Joyce, who wrote Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, that book is essentially about that idea. There's Hermann Hesse, who's an Austrian author, one of my favorite authors. He played with this idea as well. And there's additionally, I think you find in the history of English or of literature, you'll also find a lot of the marginalized people of our society. And what I mean by that is probably more LGBTQTA type personalities that have been, maybe it wasn't proper or right for them to be seen in public, but through their artistry, they could tap into that or they could express that part of themselves. And so this is a premise that I kind of fell in love with. And I really was trying to understand the artist's mind and how it related to their artwork. And it is a convoluted maze to try to navigate. And this book talks a lot about that. This book really talks about the struggles of an artist. But what's great about it, in my mind, is that it's not just an artist's struggle. Everybody struggles with these things. I think artists might be better at expressing the struggle. That's the difference. And so for him, he's saying, listen, everybody struggles with resistance. Everyone struggles with not wanting to do the thing that you know you should do. There are certain things you and I both could do that would greatly improve our life.
Oh, sure.
And yet we don't do them. I think you're pretty good. I think you probably do most of the things that you think of.
I've gotten pretty good at the self-discipline of making myself do it.
You have.
Yeah.
And I think I've gotten worse.
Worse?
In the past, I think after my separation and divorce, I think I kind of like...
Oh, well, and the reinventing of yourself requires lots of different kinds of work.
Right. Which I think I used as an excuse.
Okay.
I think it became a rationalization for me.
Sure.
To not face resistance and not to do war with resistance. Is kind of this victimization where I'm like, I'm going through a lot right now, so I don't need to do this. So I explain all of that to get to this point. This chapter is called Resistance and Fundamentalism. And there's an idea that Steven has that I kind of love. And in it, he states very early on in the book that he believes in God. He also then starts to kind of play with the different dogma. And specifically here he's talking about the fundamentalist. And a fundamentalist could be fundamentalist Muslim, fundamentalist any Christian, any denomination, but fundamentalists are going to be hardcore in their lane, whatever it is.
Would you say like legalistic?
Very extremely legalistic, yeah. And I would say that that's true because they are accepting things as fundamental. Like these things
Very
are
black and white,
fundamental. If
yeah.
you don't do these things, then you're not a fundamentalist.
Yeah.
And so, if I can, I don't want to read the whole thing, but I do want to read
No, there's
parts.
a couple of good lines, though, that will share kind of what that chapter's about.
The artist and the fundamentalist arise from societies at different stages of development. The artist is the advanced model. His culture possesses affluence, stability, enough excess of resource to permit the luxury of self-examination. The artist is grounded in freedom. He is not afraid of it. He is lucky. He was born in the right place. He has a core of self-confidence, of hope for the future. He believes in progress and evolution. His faith is that humankind is advancing, however haltingly and imperfectly, toward a better world. The fundamentalist entertains no such notion. In his view, humanity has fallen from a higher state. The truth is not out there waiting revelation. It has already been revealed.
Yeah.
The word of God has been spoken and recorded by his prophet, be he Jesus, Muhammad, or Karl Marx. Fundamentalism is the philosophy of the powerless, the conquered, the displaced, and the dispossessed. Its spawning ground is the wreckage of political and military defeat. As Hebrew fundamentalism arose during the Babylonian captivity, as white Christian fundamentalism appeared in the American South during Reconstruction, as the notion of the master race evolved in Germany following World War I. In such desperate times, the vanquished race would perish without a doctrine that restored hope and pride. Islamic fundamentalism ascends from the same landscape of despair and possesses the same tremendous and potent appeal. What exactly is this despair? It is the despair of freedom. I'm going to skip a little bit.
You might have to start reading books on tape, you know? Yeah, for the blind.
I have to do my Scottish brogue accent.
You could put it in there. Yeah.
The fundamentalist. I can't do it. The fundamentalist, or more accurately, the beleaguered individual who comes to embrace fundamentalism, cannot stand freedom. He cannot find his way into the future, so he retreats to the past. He returns in imagination to the glory days of his race and seeks to reconstitute both them and himself in their pure, more virtuous light. He gets back to basics, to fundamentals. So, and it goes on and on and on. But this is literally, it's 6 pages long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages long. And that 5 pages did more to ground me in this new iteration of myself than any entire book had done.
Yeah.
I read these 5 pages and I set the book down and like exhaled. And then I read it again. Because he so masterfully talks about this duality, this difference between, I think all people, which is, and how artists feel apart and separate from society. And I think, you know what, and here's what I mean by that. I think some amazing art is going to come out of this era. Why? Because I think people don't like the politics of this era. So I think out of protest, out of our imagination to envision a better future, better art comes to light. More art comes to light. More people feel empowered. I have friends, my friend Antoinette in Austin, Texas, after she was devastated by this political change, and then she got into activism. And now she's an activist. She's doing things. So she's doing stuff now that she didn't think she had time for before. And now this stuff that she's doing is more important than anything else she's doing.
No, I think you're right. I think that from times that get people kind of amped up comes real creativity and getting in the game of life and getting involved and and expressing yourself in different ways, especially as artists. I think this is a super hot topic, and it'd be really interesting to do something with a group of people in person. I think there's a lot to learn from this chapter, and the whole idea of being a humanist. At the end of this chapter too, I know that you really identified with that as well.
Yeah. So after I read that chapter, he references humanism in that chapter.
Yeah.
And I hadn't really thought of humanism or knew much about it, so I actually went and studied it a little bit. And that's where I got, and I've said on this podcast before, I'm more of a humanist than anything. And the principle of a humanist is that this life matters.
Yeah.
That every day and every minute and every hour matters. Because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if we get another chance at this, right? And so it makes everything matter more at a higher level.
When I think he says somewhere else in the book too, I remember underlining another part that when you're a humanist, then you believe, when he's talking about the ego and self, when you hurt another human, you're also hurting yourself.
Yeah.
So it helps you to identify that we're all on the same level. We all impact each other. And I think that's really critical.
If I was a meme writer, I would just pick this book. I would just pick up this book.
That's true. That'd be
I just pick something. Literally, I can pick up this book and turn to any page, and I can share a nugget with you guys.
You know what? We might have to have you do a meme a month. Like, that'd be really entertaining.
This one. The more scared we are of a work or calling, the more sure we can be that we have to do it.
Oh, God. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
The more scared we are of
hell.
a work or calling, the more sure we can be that we have to do it.
Yeah. It's actually a really good way to tell.
Yeah, it's a good litmus test to whether or not you should do something. If it's not scary enough, you probably shouldn't do it. It's probably not worth doing.
Probably not worth doing. Yeah.
And this, so we're just this is the way it's gonna be. We're just gonna be random. We're gonna say random stuff from this book. I think he would pretty much hate social media these days, and I'll explain why. I think people use social media. People are starting to use social media to replace actual friendships.
Oh.
What do I mean by that? I mean, I've seen enough people that have discarded friends because of a lack of agreement.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like a friend might challenge you on something and you might not like it. And so you let that friend go. Mm-hmm. And then you go on social media and you cry out. I don't know. You cry out against something, or you talk about how empowered you are.
Yeah.
And then you have all these people. You're looking for validation.
Yeah.
And you're looking for it in the number of comments and the number of likes. And then people, as they scroll past everyone's life and events and everything else, they happen to accidentally hit the like button on your post or make a comment like, "You go, girl." And here's what Steven Pressfield says. Any support we get from persons of flesh and blood is like monopoly money. It's not legal tender in that sphere where we have to do our work. In fact, the more energy we spend stoking up on support from colleagues and loved ones, the weaker we become and the less capable of handling our business.
Oh, jeez.
This is how real he is.
Talk about external validation.
When he talks about resistance and what he has to do, he's saying that the creation of art, as an artist, the creation of art is a lonely and solitary journey and must be explored in that manner. In fact, bringing people along for the ride is actually makes you weaker as an artist.
Yeah.
Looking for validation from the people that love you, who are going to tell you they like your stuff anyway, only makes you
Weaker.
a softer and weaker artist.
Yeah.
Like, Van Gogh didn't have a bunch of people to talk to. He was in his head. He was a crazy mother effer who people probably didn't want to talk to, and that he spent his time with himself.
Yeah. I can see that. Makes a lot of sense.
And so it's interesting for me to think about, like and I get that. I thought about my own writing and what I want to accomplish, and I am so horrified at how I shared my work when I was in high school.
Why?
I'm so horrified. I was so ridiculous. I want to apologize to my parents, my sister.
What do you mean?
My cousins.
Why?
My aunt and uncle. Anyone that knew me during that time frame.
Why? What did you write about?
I had like a notebook of my stuff.
Yeah.
And then I'd like pin people. I'd get at them in a place where they couldn't escape. And I'd be, let me read this to you. Right? Like, let me drop some amazingness on you. And then I'd force them to sit there as I read this story to them. And quite honestly, I didn't know my ass from my elbow. And I was a very naive kid, and I imagined...
That's the best thing ever.
Well, it is and it's not. It is in that I imagined what the real world was like. I was very sheltered, very protected, very isolated. And so
You were imagining.
I didn't drink till I was 21.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't do anything bad ever as a kid. Hardly ever. And so I had to imagine what bad people did and what evil people did. And so I'd write, and young writers, they always use too much imagery. Too much. It's just every sentence is like...
Why do you think that?
Because we're so eager to, like, find our voice and have something to say that we think we can take a simple sentence and just make it longer. Yeah. And that changes it. Or make it more flowery. Make it more emotional.
Totally. I can totally identify with that.
And
I did it as well.
That's not true. There's brilliant. Look at his chapter. He has 3-sentence chapters.
Oh yeah. But in the search for who you were becoming, I think that exploration of it is important.
Yeah. Well, okay.
I wish I could have a video of you sitting someone down and like reading.
I wish I could show it to you.
How
as
old
like
are
a
you?
memoir. I'm mostly talking like freshman through senior in high school.
Older. Okay.
But I'm telling you, it was terrible.
Would you do it with your dad and mom too?
I did.
Wow.
Not so. My dad didn't have the patience for. God bless him. He was patient sometimes, and he was a writer. So
you read his books.
He was very supportive of me being a writer.
Yeah.
And he would read my work, and he was critical, like in a good way, critical. But I would write something. Well, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
You've
told me one before.
And this is what I'm probably going to tell you.
Okay.
So I was 16 years old.
That's a good one.
My parents told me when I was young, like 10, that if I wanted to go to college, that I better start saving up. Because if I was going to college, it meant that I was paying my way through college and that they would not be able to help me. And I appreciate the fact that they told me at a young age because I started saving.
Yeah. And you're a good
saver. I got really good with money, and I also started getting very serious about finding scholarships for my college career. And I found this contest in the back of a magazine or something, and the deadline was that night at midnight.
How was that?
Like
night?
I found it like at 3 p.m. I found this contest.
Oh my gosh.
Or maybe my dad found it, to be honest. I think my dad found it, and he's like, hey, that you have to write an essay, you have to write a story, and then you have to send it in by midnight tonight. So I literally had to write it, and then I had to drive into town because we lived in the country. I had to drive into town and mail it before midnight.
And mail it?
So I sit down at the computer, and I write this story, and it's called Paris Leaving Alba. And I thought it was so smart because the main character's name was Johnny Paris. So it was that's who Paris was. Paris leaving Alba. Yes, Alba is a town in Michigan. I was going to have it be like Paris leaving France. You know, like Johnny Paris leaves France. But I don't know anything. I'm a landlocked kid in eastern Montana.
Yeah,
I didn't know anything
Paris,
about France.
Sounds amazing.
And it seemed really kind of hoity-toity. So then I was like, Paris leaving New York. Paris leaving L.A. Paris. And I was like, all these are urban cities. I don't know urban cities. Yeah. And then I go, you know what? I want some random town in Michigan. I just like picked a state. And then and then I picked a town in Michigan, and it happened to be Alba. And so that was the title, Paris Leaving Alba. That's the whole concept came from this title, that I just thought it'd be cool if some kid had a last name Paris. Okay, and then just to fast forward so everyone knows how dark and twisted my mind is. Johnny Paris is like a 12-year-old boy who is on a bus. And we don't know where he's going. Yeah. But he's just on a bus by himself. He's in Michigan. It's heavily treed. The branches of the trees are sweeping across the bus as it goes along the highway. And then he flashes back to this event when he had a family, when he had a mother who was a prostitute. For like a
That's my favorite part.
No, this is for like for loggers, like for people cutting down trees. She was a prostitute for those guys. And
Just specifically them.
yeah, and
Okay.
and she had a John who wasn't very nice, who broke a wine bottle and stabbed her a bunch of times with it. And Johnny finds her body as she's dying,
Good God.
and he finds like this half a wine bottle filling up with her blood. Like
Jeez.
this is an awful story, okay? And I am so proud.
Did you want to try wine at the time too? Did you?
You know what? An early indication.
I was wondering.
So I'm so proud of my parents for not telling me I couldn't send the story.
Yeah.
Or I mean, I'm sure they wanted to check me into a mental institution. I'm sure. Okay. My mom, I know there's so many times I wish I could show you my mom's disappointment in the sweetest way. Whenever I wrote a story about that was outside the lines. And I once wrote a line in a different story about that David imagined, like he throws a cigar in a snowbank, and he imagined that's the sound his faith made when he gave it up or something like that.
Oh, God.
And she was like, she? So anyway, I write this story, this terrible, I mean, here's the thing. It was well written.
Yeah, it was well written.
It was a
Obviously.
terrible story. I needed someone to give me notes, and then let me write about it. So I sent it off. I figured there's no chance in God's green earth this is going to get. So, little did I know, it won an award. And I got a small scholarship, and I got an honorable mention prize.
Yeah.
And it was published along with the other winners. And they wanted me to come out to Tacoma, Washington.
Good old Tacoma.
From eastern Montana,
Yeah.
to accept my award. And there would be an opportunity to do workshops and meet authors and writers and have them read your work and have them give you notes. And it was a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
And there's no way in God's green earth I was going to be able to do this. Not with, rancher's income. And I had been on a plane twice before in my life, I think. But someone in the community found out about it, and they paid my way.
In your community?
Yeah.
Wow.
They were
Do you remember what it
anonymous at first. I had a dream, actually. I actually had a dream that this person was going to send me, and they did.
Before you did it?
Before they told me.
Shut up.
I've had this happen a few times.
Well, what the heck?
Yeah, in fact, I need to tell Enmei both of these dreams.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you one.
Oh my God, I've never heard this story, guys.
I had a dream. I had this babysitter when I was super young.
I don't like
4 and
babysitters.
5. Like 4 and 5. Not past 5, I don't think. And because I would have remembered her better. And I remember being about 8 or 9, waking up from a nap and going up to my mom and saying, hey, I had a dream about Susie. And I just saw her, and she waved at me, and then she got on a bike and rode away. And that afternoon, my mom got a phone call that this person had passed away.
Oh, my God.
And she was young, like younger, 30s, 40s. She shouldn't have passed. And I had this dream and told my mom about it, like the day before it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Or the day it happened or something like that. So I had this dream that
You better be telling me any other dreams you have. If I'm waving on a bike or something.
going to... this person was giving me a gift. And that I was on an airplane. And so it turns out this person from the community heard about the award, heard that I wasn't able to go, and they offered to pay my way.
That's huge.
Now there's a catch. I was 16, barely, and my parents had to put me on a plane to Tacoma, Washington, and we got one channel growing up, and that channel happened to have cops on it. And if you watch Cops, then you were very
Tacoma,
aware
Washington's
of Tacoma,
on there.
Washington, right? So my parents are sending their baby.
'Cause what year is this?
16. So that would have been 90,
Yeah.
93, something like that.
Yeah.
So they do. I mean, it was not an easy decision for them. I land in Tacoma. This is in February. The grass is green. It blows my mind. I may as well be on a foreign planet.
Oh, wow.
I've never seen green grass in February. It was
yeah, I guess not.
amazing.
Yeah.
I thought Tacoma was the most beautiful place I'd ever seen. I'm not kidding. Because it was green everywhere.
Compared to Montana, you're like,
I
wow.
thought Tacoma was the prettiest place ever. I saw the sound,
Water, yeah.
and then it's green all over the place.
Did somebody pick you up, or did you take a bus, or what?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, there's a taxi. I took a taxi to a hotel.
Okay.
And then the next day, I slept in a hotel by myself at 16, and then I went to this workshop.
That's pretty amazing.
And at this workshop, listen. I'm an extrovert, but I'm not that extroverted, especially where in a place where I know I'm 16. I don't know anybody from anyone. So I get paired up with this writer, and we were told to bring a different piece of writing with us, different than the one that won the award. So I did. I brought something that I wrote. And she sits down and she goes, "Let me see it." She's very kind of distracted, very much I don't feel like she wants to be there, you know? And she reads this writing that I have, and it's a page and a half long. It's short, and she starts crying.
Whoa.
Like in that moment, I knew I wanted to write. Like that was winning the Olympics to me.
Yeah. That's fun. I like making people cry too. I think it's the exact same feeling. Yeah.
And here I am, and I'm 16, and I wrote something short and sweet, and I made this person cry, a complete stranger cry.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and she goes, she had to excuse herself, and then she composed herself. She came back, and she goes, "I grew up in a place just like this,
Oh, wow.
and I've never like." She goes, you cast a perfect picture. Like I could smell the smells, I could hear the sounds, like I was there.
Wow.
And there was a sense of nostalgia, and that's why she was so emotional about it. And that's when I really fell in love with writing. Like when I could see the impact it had on somebody else. Man, that's it.
Yeah. Jeez. Any other dreams you want to tell us about after that? I'm really honestly curious. I'm really curious.
We'll wait for May for that.
Oh, God.
So, anyway, I don't know.
So obviously everybody's going to be
lie?
asking when you're going to be writing your book.
Yeah, well, that's my point. When I read this book, it makes me want to sit down and write, and I get it. I mentioned last podcast, right, that if I want to do something big and great, and that means it requires action. And
well, I have the perfect quote to read you from the book, All Around Action, because the other part that I underlined and starred and highlighted was on page 122 called The Magic of Making a Start. And he says, all sorts of things occur to help one that would not otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance which no man would have dreamed would come his way. I have learned a deep respect for one of, I don't know if this is pronounced Goethe's couplets. Whatever you can do or dream, you can. Begin it. Boldness has genius, magic, and power in it. Begin it now. And so basically saying, when you begin, you start to put into play things in the universe that you don't even know, because most people don't begin. So maybe you write a page tonight, and before you know it, you have a book.
Right. Well, and I love how he's so simple in his expressions, too, because he doesn't, hide it. He goes, "The years have taught me one skill, how to be miserable," which I totally identify with. But his point is that you have to suffer a little bit. You have to be miserable.
Oh, sure. To have something to write about.
If you're going to fight for something that you care about and that you're passionate about, then you got to know you're going to be miserable. The next page, because this is war, baby, and war is hell. There's a part of that sounds to me like Hemingway, kind of, where he has a very, he paints a very clear picture of suffering.
Yeah. What do you think about his talk about angels and muses?
I mean, I love it. I think any artist, having a muse is it's funny because when I'll tell you what I think. I go to the very beginning of the book. I'll read the very beginning of the book. I get up, take a shower, have breakfast. I read the paper, brush my teeth. If I have phone calls to make, I make them. I've got my coffee now. I put on my lucky work boots and stitch up the lucky laces that my niece Meredith gave me. I head back to my office, crank up the computer. My lucky-headed sweatshirt is draped over the chair with the lucky charm I got from a gypsy in Sainte Maries de la Mer for only $8 in francs, and my lucky Largo name tag that came from a dream I once had. I put it on. On my thesaurus is my lucky cannon that my friend Bob Versandi gave me from Morro Castle, Cuba. I point it toward my chair so it can fire inspiration into me. I say my prayer, which is the invocation of the muse from Homer's Odyssey, translation by T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, which my dear mate Paul Rink gave me and which sits near my shelf with the cufflinks that belonged to my father and my lucky acorn from the battlefield at Thermopylae. Everything there is a muse for him.
That's true.
He's listing everything off. I mean, he's painting a picture that says, I am superstitious. I need things around me to motivate me into doing my work.
Yeah.
I have to have this belief that there's power in these objects, and if I surround myself with these objects, that I will absorb their power.
Yeah.
Because I am not capable in and of myself to do it on my own.
I love that. I feel like my house makes me more powerful.
Sure, I get that.
It totally does. It's totally
I'm a big
a happy
believer
place.
that
like
my
your
house is my sanctuary.
Totally.
My wireless network is called Sanctuary.
Yeah.
And that's because I want, wherever I live, I don't mind spending more money on my sanctuary.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
your environment is so important.
Very important.
Yeah. I love that.
So
I forgot that beginning
when you
part.
ask me what do I think about the muse piece, man, artists, they're always on a search for their muse, and they're always in a relationship with a muse.
Yeah.
And sometimes that muse is spiritual. It can be like as if a God breathed, or some sort of angelic spirit, or it's like there's a touch from the divine, and that inspires creation. It could be sexualized. That's very common in artistry. That a muse is overtly sexual, beautiful, intimate, naked. It's just the muse is the source of inspiration that makes you do the work.
Yeah.
And I think it's an essential piece. I think the mythology of the muse is an essential piece of the story of artistry.
I love this book.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And I know we're not doing it justice, and I think it's a tough book to talk about.
Yeah,
because it
dive
is
into.
So different. But
it's really applicable, and I think not only for teams, but for just people individual and businesses this is the kind of conversations that I think people don't have at companies or at meetings and things like that really bring out really interesting things to talk about. Which why I love that we read books like this. I actually took a picture of one of the pages and posted it to a private Facebook group and just said, hey, we're about to do a podcast on this book, and check out this page about fear and what it means when you're fearful of success. He talks about it again on page 143 and how resistance feeds on fear. And it's so prevalent to everything we do in business because we're constantly taking risks. I mean, you and I were just talking yesterday about the risks that we're taking and when are they going to pay off? When are they going to start to, when are we going to see the fruit? And fear, man, it can be crippling. And so I think this book is powerful on a lot of different ways.
I think what's kind of great is it reads a little bit like an almanac.
Oh, yeah.
In the sense that if you have something, you want to understand a part of resistance. For instance, he has a chapter on resistance and rationalization. And I'm going to read the first and the last sentences from that chapter.
That's a great one.
The first sentence, rationalization is resistance's right-hand man. Its job is to keep us from feeling the shame we would feel if we truly faced what cowards we were for not doing our work. And then the last sentence is, last two sentences. But rationalization has its own sidekick. It's that part of our psyche that actually believes what rationalization tells us. It's one thing to lie to ourselves. It's another thing to believe it.
I always get rationalization confused. And then so it takes me back to the definition of authenticity that Gary John Bishop gave us, which was it's when you tell the truth to yourself about yourself.
Yeah.
So rationalization's when you are telling yourself a lie
And
you believe it.
Yeah, and I've done a lot of study and work around rationalization because of my study of narcissism and narcissists, and rationalization is like a narcissist's secret weapon.
And then some don't even realize they're doing it.
No, that's
right?
my point. And the point of rationalization, the problem of rationalization for anybody is that it's a trap for your mind.
Yeah.
Because you believe it personally, and it's not true, and you know it not to be true.
Okay, so
but
you don't know
you
it.
tell it to yourself in a way that makes it digestible, acceptable. It makes your behavior palatable. And so by making it palatable, now you can believe it. And then by believing it, you forget that it was a lie.
Okay.
And now you're lying to yourself and believing it.
Yeah.
That's the problem. That's
Yeah.
what Steven Pressfield's talking about.
Yeah.
If we become untethered and we forget what things are lies and what things are truths, we're lost.
Yeah.
And that's a scary place to be.
Mm-hmm.
I've been there. And part of the work I had to do was to acknowledge the rationalizations I had made, to realize that they were lies, and then to learn how to recognize the early stages, the larval stages of rational thought, rationalizations, so that I could go, you know what, that's a lie. That's not true. What's the truth? Because, yeah, I'm a master manipulator, and I was my biggest victim of that. Is I would trick myself into thinking. Now, part of it was a survival mechanism for me.
Yeah.
Part of it for me was if I allowed the full weight of my situation at different points in my life,
Yeah.
if I had allowed that to ring true, I wouldn't be able to handle it.
Yeah.
And so part of that was a survival mechanism. The problem is when it moved from survival to successful, and then I felt like a fraud. I felt like a lie.
The whole imposter syndrome thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then it reached a point where it didn't serve me anymore because I cared more about my friendships than results. Eventually. There was a time I cared about results more than anything. And we were very successful then. And now I'm trying to figure out how to do both. How to be successful and not rationalize my way there. And it's not as much fun.
Makes me want to give this book away. It's not as much fun.
No.
Well,
it's like dancing sober.
Once you do it, though, it's awesome.
It's not. It's
really awesome.
No, it's not. Most people, unless you're a dancer, dancing's not fun sober, especially the first song, right? Like, it's not.
So funny. And this makes me want to give the book away now. I'll have to get some more copies.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I feel I gave away my marked up copy, so I had to reread this book in the last 36 hours. And I had marked it up again, and I'll probably still give it away.
Yeah.
And I would just encourage everyone to go get a copy. I've given this, she won't mind me saying this. I gave a copy to Via Williams, who works with Ben Kinney's companies. And it had a powerful effect on her. I think the simplest idea from this book that I love is naming the enemy.
Yeah.
Naming that thing that we don't want to do.
Yeah.
And we could call it laziness or we could call it procrastination. But I like resistance better because it names an enemy that I can fight. Like, so when I have a thought, hey, I should go do this, and I don't get off the couch to do it, I go, oh, that's resistance. And then I'm like, oh, I have to fight that guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to get up and do something.
It's much easier when you have a name to something to like be able to place it.
You want to know something kind of scary
Sure.
in regards to that?
Yeah.
In spirituality, like in fundamentalist Protestant Christianity, or I'll just say in Christianity in general, the idea of exorcism, the idea of being able to rid somebody of a spirit, the only thing that was necessary for you to be able to do that was knowing the name of the spirit.
Really?
So if you knew the name of the spirit, then you could get rid of it. You could fight it. But until then, you couldn't.
That's crazy.
So that's a spiritual, centuries-old idea that naming something is power.
Wow.
Like it gives you power over it.
Yeah. Dude.
Power of language, man.
Power of language. Language is the house of being.
Well, I'll even go better. If you study the Hebrew word of spirit, of specifically spirit in the spiritual sense, like spirit means God breathed. So when you think about the human body or the human existence, you think about this meat suit that we have, right? Our body.
Meat suit.
And then soul, and then spirit. And I've studied this a bunch because I was trying to figure out the difference between soul and spirit to some degree. And there's a bunch of scriptures how when we die, the spirit returns to God. And the actual Hebrew definition of that word means God breathed. So the idea is that God breathed into us life, and that's his spirit. And then when we die, that returns to him.
Interesting. Okay. And the soul
then goes to heaven or hell or purgatory and suffers its fate.
Interesting.
Whatever it may be.
Wow, we've covered exorcism. We've covered like some great topics today.
Spin the wheel, Jesse. Let's go.
I really want to ask.
What?
Have you ever seen an exorcism?
I have.
I thought you might have.
Okay, so to be clear, I think an exorcism is a Catholic thing.
Yeah.
So I didn't see a Catholic exorcism.
Okay.
Not like in the movie Exorcist.
Okay. I can't watch that movie.
Well, a lot of people probably shouldn't watch that movie. That movie couldn't be made today, I don't think. I don't know how they could make a little girl do those terrible things. So we didn't call it an exorcism, we called it deliverance. So I've been present when deliverances have happened and where evil spirit was compelled to come out of somebody.
Wow. Interesting.
The funniest story about that is that when you're a hardcore Christian, I mean, you go to church like 3 to 4 times a week.
Yeah.
Right? Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday. That was my schedule, pretty much. And when I got into high school and started dating, it got in the way. And
you think?
There were times when I would have to take a date, my girlfriend or a date to church. And our church at the time was the crazy church on the hill. That's like everyone kind of knew it as that small town. The town I grew up in was about 8,400 people. And everybody knew this church was the oddball church where people spoke in tongues and did all sorts of things. So I took this date on a Wednesday night. I took her to church. And we sat in the front row because I'm not the pastor's kid, but I'm pretty much the pastor's kid. So I'm expected to be up front. So we're sitting up front, and then it happened to be a very special Wednesday night where like people were barking like dogs. And then there was this deliverance over this one individual. And my date looked at me like, what did you bring me to? Like, what? This amazing. Is not happening right now. And I'm like, yeah, it is. I was very entertained. I was extremely entertained. It was psychopathic, my level of entertainment in watching her in this environment. And I go, I do this every day.
Amazing. Oh my God, that sounds like a story in and of itself. I see like a short story book at some point.
Well, I've written So I've written a bunch of short stories. I've been published. I say I've been published 3 times. I think I've been published twice, and I sold a 3rd piece, and then the magazine went out of business before they could publish it. Like the issue it was supposed to come out, they went out of business. It's probably for my sake. I've read that piece since then. It's terrible. But I wrote that Paris Leaving Alba was the first thing that was published. I wrote a poem in college. I wish I could remember the title. I could totally think of it. Oh, I didn't bring my phone in here. It was something about Indian head pennies and couch cushions. And then I wrote this piece about being a wrangler at a dude ranch. And I took this English gentleman, this English pervert. I'll call him he's pervert. I took this English pervert on a horseback ride. And it was such a bizarre experience and conversation that I wrote about that experience. And that's what I sold to another magazine.
Wow.
Before it went out of business.
Oh my God.
And quite honestly, I'll tell you that I felt I was a very angry writer as a kid because I was so sheltered in such a weird way. I wasn't, when I tell you these stories, I realize I wasn't that sheltered. I was just exposed to a totally different side of life.
Yeah.
But as far as like a normal things that kids go through, I didn't have any of that. Like I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I didn't party, I didn't drag main, I didn't do any of the actual normal kid things. And there was some anger there because I wanted to write. And I didn't, it was like, to me, it was like I was writing about a world I had never been to. And so it sounded fake and false and
not real. Yeah.
And I remember feeling that way in college. I got into some advanced writing classes, and I know that everyone feels this way as they get older. This kind of Mark Twain has a famous line that says, "Youth is wasted on the young."
Yeah.
And as we get older and wiser, we could have done it so much better.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
And I was just so young and so naive for such a tremendous amount of time. In terrible ways too. One horrible way is that I liked reading I don't know how to say this word, like the canon. Yeah. There's an idea that there's certain books that are like forever memorialized as being essential books, especially in American literature. And I would try to I would pick them up at the library, but then I never read them because I was too busy. And this is when I'm an adult. I'm like married. I'm living in Seattle area, and I have nothing to do. So I'm reading books, trying to read books. And then I would have a conversation with my father, and I'd tell him I'd reading The Tropic of Cancer, which is not, you don't want to hear from your child that they're reading this book. Another one is that I was reading Deliverance. And I didn't know what it was about. Yeah. And I just told my dad, I picked up Deliverance at the bookstore. Well, Deliverance is about child rape.
Oh, jeez.
But I was so naive, I didn't know. I just heard it was I knew the title.
Yeah.
I heard it was, because I was aware of the title, I thought it must be good. And here I think every time I spoke to my dad, I just horrified him worse and worse and worse by just naming a worse title. Like I did. I started with Tropic of Cancer, and then I went with Henry and June, and then I went to Deliverance, and then eventually I just was like, I should probably stop doing this.
Was that a bookstore in Mill Creek?
Yeah, or Linwood.
Yeah,
somewhere in there.
That's what happens when you move to Seattle.
You read all the books that people try to burn.
Yeah.
It's probably true. Yeah. So I think that's why, I know that's why I love this book so much.
Yeah.
It connects me to my youth.
Oh, for sure.
It connects me to my artistry. But it's so applicable to entrepreneurs. And it's so applicable to everybody who just struggles with
because everyone struggles with
following your passion,
some form of resistance. Yeah. It's a really, really great one.
And I'll just explain this book is on a lot of lists. Like if you Google this book,
Oh, yeah.
you'll find it on a lot of lists. We kind of looked into booking him to see if we could book him.
Yeah, we did.
For the podcast.
I know, I was thinking of that. Well, we were thinking of it for the retreat.
And it's pretty funny because when we researched it, we found a quote from him that basically was like, why would I ever speak at anything? Yeah. Why would I ever go on someone's podcast? I already wrote it down. Read the book. Like he's so adverse to, he doesn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Not with us, not with other people, not in a format outside of the book that he already wrote. I think that's pretty hilarious. But we did find out the one person he said yes to was Oprah Winfrey.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So you can find a podcast with him and Oprah Winfrey. What's that one you listen to?
Super Soul Sunday.
Super Soul Sunday.
He might be on that one.
So you can hear him.
But
that's probably the only place you'll ever hear him speak because he very much is emphatic that I already wrote all my thoughts down on the subject, so read the book.
Yeah. I love it.
I like it a lot.
I like it a lot. It's a great book to review.
Yeah, you should probably read it. You should probably get a copy. Read it.
You should probably do it.
You should probably go through it with a fine-tooth comb.
Do it.
You should probably comment, kick us.
Kick us a comment.
Kick us a knowledge bomb, bomb.
Last thing I'll say is Robert McKee, who wrote the foreword. I loved how his procrastination's like his number one resistance. And how he said after reading the book, he felt a surge of positive calm. And he's like, I now know I can win this war. Procrastination was a big piece for him. And that's why Steven asked him to write it, because he knew it was such a hard thing for him.
All right, I got to read a few more quotes. And then we can
do it.
Okay. Again, this is the very beginning of the book. There's a secret that real writers know that wannabe writers don't. And the secret is this. It's not the writing part that's hard. What's hard is sitting down to write. What keeps us from sitting down is resistance. Most of us have two lives, the life we live and the unlived life within us. Between the two stands resistance. Mm-hmm. Resistance is the most toxic force on the planet. It is the root of more unhappiness than poverty, disease, and erectile dysfunction. And look in your own heart. Unless I'm crazy, right now a still small voice is piping up, telling you, as it has 10,000 times, the calling that is yours and yours alone. You know it. No one has to tell you. And unless I'm crazy, you're no closer to taking action on it than you were yesterday or will be tomorrow. You think resistance isn't real? Resistance will bury you.
Jeez.
Man, come on, man. This is good stuff. I love it.
Well, they say we're talking about this with some people at our local mastermind group and talking about how sometimes you wait until certain things happen in life, certain circumstances, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, now I have to write a book because I might die soon or something like that. I think we wonder often if like life throws things in your path in order to like force you to take action. So I like to think that my goal now, because I used to be that type of person who would just like wait until it got so bad before I made a change. And now I like to be proactive about it.
I wish I knew what you were talking about. Who would wait for things to get so bad that they wait? I'm speaking of myself. I
really was speaking about myself.
I know, but in 2018, I had my back affected me on a level I don't remember.
Really bad.
And in 2019, at the start of 2019, I said, I can't live this way. I have to figure this out.
Yeah.
And all of 2019 has been focused on that. And it's been a wild roller coaster ride.
Yeah. It's a big deal.
And apparently I fractured my back. Apparently I fractured my back in several places, maybe several different times. And I was so adverse.
It's just so crazy. Do you know exactly where?
Not completely. It sounds like my tailbone is like snapped in half.
The immense amount of pain that comes from that is insane.
And I don't know exactly. I'm trying to figure it out. There's a lot of things we have to figure out. And I was kind of raised with this fear of doctors. And I was also raised with this kind of cowboy antiseptic, which is toughen up, just power through, cowboy up. And so I think, and I have a very high pain tolerance, and so I think I fractured my back many times. I don't remember when or how, and I just toughed it out.
Jeez.
To the point where I'm in constant pain.
Yeah.
That's what I'm.
Yeah.
So I don't advise that. As
right.
A strategy.
Well, what was something probably fractured, and then it didn't heal completely, and then you fractured something else, and that's just been compounding.
Well, and who knows if it, did it grow back correctly?
Yeah.
Probably not, right? Well, it's not like I saw someone who made sure it was growing back the way it was supposed to. So, and it's a lesson to me, and I'm learning it, and I'm mad at myself, and I'm embarrassed that it took this level of discomfort to get me here.
A lot of people don't go to the doctor. Yeah.
It's funny, my doctor he's like reviewing my medical history.
It's been 25 years since we've seen you.
Exactly. He's like, you don't like to go to the doctor much. No, I don't.
Yeah, it's a big deal though that you're doing that and exploring it, because it's gonna impact. It literally is impacting you every single day. So the day you can actually start walking and not have pain, that's gonna be like, oh my God, a brand new world.
A brand new world.
Can you imagine going through a day without feeling pain?
I just can't imagine jumping out of bed in the morning.
Yeah,
Let's get this. It's Monday. I'm so excited. There's that. There's that. Simple things like that. Yeah. There's I operate in a mode of gingerness now. When I get out of it, how I twist and how I get up.
Yeah, you think about it. Yeah.
No, listen, I did 23andMe. And it says in there that
23andMe.
Supposed to be a power lifter.
Oh, that's right.
Which I was on the brink of doing some pretty amazing, major powerlifting.
Uh-huh.
And now I can't do that. So.
At least not right now.
Not right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might have come. What if I broke my back weightlifting?
When you were lifting weights? It's possible.
I've lifted weights my entire life.
Yeah.
And I think the most I've done is 4.
That's ridiculous.
20.
Just 4 is enough.
Benching 420, 420. Yeah. I don't know.
That's insane.
I don't know. I did it somehow.
Yeah. Well, they'll figure it out.
But the point is that you have to do the tough thing. You have to do the thing you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's going to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's going to hot yoga.
Mm-hmm. Often.
Sometimes it's having a conversation.
Yeah.
That you don't want to have.
That you don't want to have.
Are you operating off a checklist this week, by the way? Because, I feel like you're
Actually, yes.
Oh, good. Literally?
Actually, yes. I have a checklist in my head.
Oh, for everybody?
You named it.
For everybody, this has been a week, okay? Because Margaret got it in her skull to get some things done.
And by things, I mean conversations I've been needing to
have. Not when she's rested.
And top-notch behavior.
No, not when she's rested and feels amazing and is at the peak of health. She's like, let's see. I'm going to throw a retreat. I'm going to overwhelm myself. And then I'm going to exhaust myself. And then I'm going to probably get a little bit sick. And then now let's get a bunch of shit done.
I know. I tend to do that. I'm getting better with my timing, but I haven't quite perfected it yet.
I'm
don't worry, I got through. Actually, let me think. I got through my checklist, I'm pretty sure.
Thank God.
Yeah.
I almost didn't make it.
I know.
Because then you get emotional, and then I shared this script with someone this week that there are certain practices we don't do because
certain practices?
Well, it's dual agency.
Oh, yeah, that.
But that's boring to talk about. But I talk about how there are certain practices that we don't practice because
because it would introduce emotions into a transaction.
Right, because specifically what the script is about dual agency, which is when one agent represents both the buyer and the seller in the same transaction. And I tell people that the reason we don't practice it is because everyone wants to be represented. And if people feel like their interests aren't being represented, then they get emotional. And when people get emotional, they stop thinking logically.
Yeah.
And when people stop thinking logically, deals fall apart.
Weird things happen.
Or in Margaret's case, if she decides to get overwhelmed and undernourished and sleep deprived, and then creates a checklist to work off of, then she can move out of logic and into emotion, and then all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, pretty much that's true.
All checked off.
All checked off. And what's funny is as soon as I did something, then Enmei called me to check in about something. I was like, Enmei, what fantastic timing you have.
She's like, I know.
Yeah, she does know. She does. It was a good week, though. I'm glad it's Thursday or whatever day it is. Yeah.
Anything else you want to tell the people?
No, just really appreciate people tuning in and sharing the podcast more and more, getting messages from random people around the country that are getting referred to it from other people. So it's really cool to watch that kind of unfold. And we have some really powerful episodes coming up too, along with what we've already done. So I'm just excited to see where this thing grows. And we were talking about doing a continuous segment idea, which Jesse brought up to me before this. And I'd like to know if anybody has any ideas of what they'd like us to talk about, actually, because I hadn't really thought of that concept. So,
well, let's go to Concept Corner with Jesse for a second.
I like that Concept Corner.
In Concept Corner, Jesse explains that I think if we're going to produce this well, we should have some recurring segments.
Yeah.
That anchor us a little bit, so that we can be a little loosey-goosey.
Oh, for sure.
Like, I forget what I'm talking about half the time. And then you'll laugh and I'll forget what you're talking about. And so I think it's good for us to have bookends. Like if we had a segment at the beginning or a segment in the middle or a segment at the end. And I think it should be entertaining. I think if we have to, one should be like educational and coaching based, and then the other one should be more entertainment based.
Okay.
And we're looking for ideas.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. One of the podcasts I like to listen to is the Congratulations podcast by Chris D'Elia.
Okay.
He's a comedian. And it is not your normal podcast. It is him just speaking stream of consciousness pretty much for the whole time.
Wow.
But he's a comedian, so you can get away with it.
Yeah.
And he has a segment called Misconnections where he reads like the most outlandish misconnections from Craigslist.
I like that.
From whatever city he's going to that week to perform, right? And it's hilarious. Like it's hilarious in his own way. But that's his bit. But that's something, you know, I just want something that we can kind of like bookend every once in a while to make people feel like an old shirt. Like we're an old shirt that they put on just to be comfortable and chillaxed at the end of the day. Maybe a little threadbare at times, but soft and soothing to the skin.
Kind of like the shirt you're wearing right now.
This is not threadbare.
People really like how soft it is.
I'm wearing an ASMR and whiskey shirt.
Yeah.
Available now. Merch.
Merch. Wow. Okay, this is gonna get my brain thinking. Like, I mean, I'm already thinking like favorite drinks, favorite whiskey drink, words on the wind.
We're not doing
like
recipes.
Word of the week.
Recipes: 1/4, 1/4 bourbon, 1/4 cup bourbon.
A sprinkle of sugar.
Yeah, we're not doing recipes.
I'm not thinking recipes. I'm just thinking like, I'm thinking now. This is good.
Yeah, and it can't be visual because that would lose the point.
Yeah. So if you guys have ideas, share on social media and tag us. I'd love to see what people. I might post something.
Let's be real. Tag Margaret.
Tag Margaret. Yeah.
I'm over social media right now.
I don't know. You're posting things suddenly, and people are like, "Oh, is this Jesse or is this Margaret?"
I had a conversation. I gotta think about if I can think about the point I made.
Okay.
Who was I talking? I think it was Jessica. No, I was talking to someone about that post. Oh no, okay, I remember. I was talking to this friend. Okay, so I put a post up this week.
Yeah.
On Facebook
for the first time.
For the first time in
a long
3
time.
months, and it just said, "Hey, we have more leads than we can handle.
Yeah.
We're looking for more agents. who do you know that I should know?
Yeah.
That very basic, hey. And this was strategic because Margaret does our recruiting, and every once in a while she's over it, and then she asks me for help, and then I agree, and then I forget. And so with Margaret being in a mode where she's checking things off her list, I had to do something. And so I did this post in an effort to help us, our recruiting efforts.
Yeah.
And it helps, right? If the rainmaker is the one saying, hey,
totally.
I'm looking for people, then people will respond. And we did. We got some response. Mm-hmm. But there is some annoying as F responses on there, which is like, send them my way. And I'm like, that's not what I'm trying to accomplish at all. Okay? I understand you think you're funny and send them my way. I'm not sending you leads. I need an agent on my team, and I'm going to give them leads because these are my adopted children, and I'm going to give them nourishment and sustenance, and I'm going to feed them and love them and hug them and squeeze them and wash them and train them.
Wow.
And then send them on their way with my leads. That's how it's going to work. And everyone's like, wow, good for you. And I'm like, there's no good here. This doesn't mean that we have more business than we can handle. It means we have more leads than we can handle. Yeah. And if we have more leads, if we don't handle these leads, they don't become clients. And if they don't become clients, they don't turn into commission checks. And if they don't turn into commission checks, then Jesse goes hungry and Margaret goes hungry. And I don't want that. Mm-hmm. So I am saying I'm being purposeful in my business. Do you have an agent to recommend? Yes or no? And instead this is why I hate social media. F Facebook, F this. I'll have to sort through the chaff. I have to go through the weeds to find these nuggets of people that are like, me.
I love it. I love it so much. It does help, so thank you. And even just talking about it on the podcast here.
Which reminds me, I think I should just have a pet peeve segment that I just go off on every once in a while.
Well, I'm pretty sure Jillian Farrar would love that as well. One of our past buyer's agents. Pet peeve corner.
That's not alliteration. Should be pet peeve patio.
Patio. Here we are on the patio.
Hey, let's go to the pet peeve patio.
Oh my gosh,
and
say
then
that
we do
15
all
times.
These like audio cues, like clop, 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 clop.
That's the next level of production that we've not yet done. Oh my God.
Welcome to Pet Peeve Patio. I just stepped in dog crap. Guess what? I hate dog crap.
Oh my God. Well, I think we've discovered one. I also like ear hole a lot.
Ear hole?
Yeah, something having to do with ear hole. Like what was dumped into your ear hole today? This is something Margaret's going to have to learn to grow with a little bit. I'm going to have to do some Googling on this.
Right. If people want randomness, you are the place to go.
True.
But it's not randomness that's like rooted
in anything particular. No.
It's just completely random.
It is.
Margaret?
So yeah, Margaret's random fact of the day or Margaret's rando.
Go. Random.
Margaret, go. Just go. Random. I am sparkle dust.
You're sparkle dust?
Yeah.
I thought you were tungsten light.
That too.
You are tungsten light and sparkle dust?
At the same time. That's all I have today.
And that is the end of Margaret's random rocking chair.
I like it.
Well, everybody help us out, okay? Obviously, we aren't good at this. Obviously, we're struggling.
Obviously,
you need to help us out. Tell us how to do this.
Yeah. And what is this? Should we give a little sneak peek for next week or leave them hanging?
I mean, I think you'd be giving me a sneak peek because I don't know what's happening.
For one of our next episodes, we actually have it scheduled next week.
We do?
Yeah. Is
it a she?
Mm-hmm.
That's next week?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Should we talk about it or no?
It rhymes with Shanique Feldstrom.
If you can figure that out, comment on the post today.
First comment of the actual person's name gets a copy of The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. And we are out.
That was the best ending.